Have you ever done anything like this before? Well, guess what? Neither have we. Oh, right now we're at about 15 feet of water. This boat drafts 4.5. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome aboard the Pictured Rocks Cruises. On behalf of the National Park Service, I'd also like to welcome you to Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore. Your cruise out to the Pictured Rocks today will cover a distance of right around 34 miles round trip. Should take about 2 hours and 5 minutes to complete. Along the trip, we'll be seeing 13 miles of sandstone cliffs that drop off into the water. Some places those cliffs here a few times a year to get away from the very hectic pace of busy downtown Munising. Well, just ahead of those summer homes, notice that older looking structure. Looks like an old school or church. Well, that's actually the old East Channel Lighthouse. We've reached our first point of interest, called Miner's Castle. Formation's about 85 feet high. If you look on top of the cliffs, notice where the Park Service has erected a few observation decks. They've also built a nice park up there, filled with barbecue pits, picnic tables, and a facilities building. To get out here, take H58 east out of Munising. Follow the road signs for Miner's Castle. Should take about 20 minutes. This small trickle of water is what's left of Bridal Veil Falls. Bridal Veil Falls only runs in the springtime after the snow melts or after a heavy rain. Well, the reason for this is some beavers build dams on top of the creek that feed the falls. Now it pretty much dries up in the summertime. And these next 3 large coves are called the Painted Coves. Try to remember your colors. Reds, browns, and oranges are from iron. The blues and greens are from copper. White is from calcium, and black is from manganese. You can see how this...
Luego de mi backpacking trip, sabía que tenía la oportunidad y el tiempo para poder hacer este boat tour, el cual me daba la oportunidad de poder ver desde otra perspectiva todo lo que había caminado. Fue lindo porque pude ver todo lo que había caminado en otras ocasiones también, no solamente en esta.
On top of the cliff, what looks to be bushes, well, those are actually old, stunted trees. What happens in the winter is large waves will crash into here and get on top, and by midwinter, there'll be 3 to 4 feet of ice up there. Pretty much stunts their growth.
Aunque la tarde estaba nublada, se podía contemplar cada belleza de cada momento en que el bote podía dar alguna parada y el capitán podía explicar paso por paso cada lugar. Y lo que me encantó fue el poder ver cosas que antes las había visto ya. Mirar las cosas desde otro ángulo es hermoso porque es como si estuviéramos viendo la picture pero desde otro ángulo. Este viaje lo recomiendo. Creo que es una de las mejores cosas que he hecho en estos tiempos.
This is Rainbow Cave. If you look very closely in the mouth of Rainbow Cave, you might notice that groundwater seepage falling from the ceiling and into the lake. Almost like it's raining inside Rainbow Cave. Well, that groundwater does run all year round and creates huge colorful icicles in the wintertime. This large archway is called Grand Portal. According to government charts, Grand Portal is the highest rock formation along the pictured rocks, towering right around 210 feet high. There used to be a series of caves and caverns extending to where the boat is now, covering an additional 6 acres. But that came crashing down back in 1902. The cave you see in the mouth of Grand Portal caved in about 25 years ago. You used to be able to fit a small boat in through there, but now you pretty much have to rock climb. A little hard for some people to pick out. It's called the broken flower vase. Now picture the trees as the flowers and the rock as the vase. Kind of has a narrow waist or stem with a flared bottom and a chip off the right. Some people from the Detroit area say it looks a lot like this Stanley Cup. I'm surprised they can still remember what this Stanley Cup looks like. Well, this next formation is called the Indian drums. Kind of look like bear's legs. When a 15-foot wave comes crashing into here, sounds a lot like thunder. This is Chapel Cove. Have Any of you ever done anything like this before? Well, guess what? Neither have we. Well, right now we're at about 15 feet of water. This boat drafts 4.5. And we've reached our last point of interest, called Spray Falls. Spray Falls is one of the only waterfalls that runs year-round along the pictured rocks. And what happens in the winter is an ice column forms around the outside and the water flows through the center. Well, the rocks do continue for about 1 more mile. Then it tapers off to a sand beach for 12 miles. Goes all the way to the point you can see in the distance, called Ensemble Point. Around Ensemble Point is that small village of Grand Marais. If you ever make it to Grand Marais, you shouldn't miss the sand dunes. They extend some 300 feet above the lake. On a return trip, we'll be cruising down the same shoreline. In some places, I'll try to get you just a little bit closer. But other than that, just sit back and enjoy the ride. The East Channel Lighthouse is one of the oldest lighthouses still standing on Lake Superior. It was built back in 1867. The last man to run the old lighthouse was a man named George Pryor. He lived out here in considerable isolation with his small family. And when I mean small family, it was just him, his wife, and their 12 children. Lantern back in 1906. That's when this was replaced by the range lights in Munising. About 20 years ago, a joint preservation group was formed to save the old lighthouse. Can kind of see what they've done. Built that break wall in front to protect it from erosion, put new wood siding on, even put a new copper roof on the lantern room.